Great Demon King, Chapter 30. A tantalizing moment on the back of a battle steed. On the journey toward the town of Droll, the mountain of items that had been strapped onto Shuo was redistributed among the group's battle steeds. Relieved from a great deal of the burden, he now found himself seated behind Fanny, a position that had him both excited and apprehensive from the moment they took off. Although it was an otherwise straightforward ride, the reality of having his body so close to Fanny's was anything but simple. Her mage robe, which accentuated the graceful curve of her back, shifted gently with the horse's movements, occasionally brushing against him. Her soft, fragrant hair fluttered behind her head, sometimes tickling the tip of his nose or brushing his cheeks. The faint, delicate perfume that clung to her reminded him of fresh blossoms after a light rain, an alluring scent that made it nearly impossible for him to remain calm. Fanny herself sat upright, her posture regal and confident as she steered the horse. Even through the loosely fitted fabric of her robe, her shapely figure was impossible to hide. Shuo's gaze seemed magnetically drawn to every subtle contour of her back and shoulders, and he found that even the slightest shifting in the saddle sent thrilling pulses of sensation through him. As the horse galloped, the space between them gradually closed with each bounce. It started subtly enough, just a slight brush of her lower back against his abdomen whenever they lurched. Soon, though, the jolting rhythm of hooves striking ground brought them into firmer contact. Shuo's stomach occasionally bumped against Fanny's rear. Through the thin layers of fabric, he could sense the softness of her body pressed against him. He struggled to keep his breathing steady, but every jolt stoked the fire of his imagination. Deep down, he knew it was inappropriate, but at the same time it felt impossible to avoid. Between the strong up-and-down motion of the horse and Fanny's gentle figure, Shuo's senses quickly began to betray him. He felt his lower body respond, his muscles tensing and blood surging as his arousal grew. Mentally, he fought to remain composed, but physically he could do little to stem his body's natural reaction. By the time the horse's pace had settled into a brisk canter, his lower abdomen was not only flush with her backside, he could feel a distinct hardness pressing exactly against her curves each time the saddle dipped. An electric current of raw excitement raced through him, and his mind turned chaotic. He recalled he was still a virgin, and the rush of sensation felt like thunderbolts crashing through his nerves. It was exhilarating, arousing, and terrifying, all at once. Fanny's neck, which peeked out from her robes, had gradually taken on a rosy hue. Her porcelain skin betrayed the flush rising to her cheeks, giving her an almost ethereal glow. Beneath the veneer of discipline, she appeared unsettled as well, her posture still upright, but her breathing had grown a bit unsteady. She refrained from looking back at him, possibly uncertain how to handle this increasingly awkward intimacy. Shuo's heart pounded like a war drum. The gentle sway of Fanny's waist beckoned him with every movement, and without consciously deciding to, he let his hands creep forward. He wanted to hold her, or at least stabilize the precarious closeness that was steadily fanning his desires into a raging inferno. Slipping both arms around her, he placed them lightly on her waist. The moment he did so, a thrilling shiver shot up his spine. Her body felt warm beneath the layers of fabric, and her curves were more enticing than he had even dared to imagine. It was enough to make his head spin. Overwhelmed by longing, he nudged closer, wanting to keep their lower bodies flushed together. What happened next came as a painful shock. Two sharp jabs of agony exploded on the back of Shuo's hands, causing him to recoil instantly. He glanced down to see Fanny's nails digging into his flesh, her normally gentle features now twisted into a mixture of anger and embarrassment. Her voice came out in an enraged hiss, carrying just enough volume for him to hear over the thunder of hooves. "Control yourself, Brian," she whispered fiercely, her blush deepening. "If you don't, I'll throw you off this horse." Despite her warning, she evidently realized that his body's reaction was partly beyond his control. There was a difference between intentional molestation and an accidental collision spurred by the horse's vigorous movement. Yet the heat in her cheeks betrayed how flustered she was. Shuo opened his mouth to apologize, only to have the words fail him. He felt his entire face burning, mortified that he'd been caught in such a compromising position. Worse yet, his physical arousal continued to press against Fanny's body, refusing to subside. Tension spun in the air, as thick as fog. Suddenly, he felt his body seize up. A lightning-like jolt of pleasure tore through him, accompanied by an involuntary spasm at his core. He sucked in a ragged breath, as a wave of euphoria drowned out rational thought. Fanny, clearly aware something was happening, threw a rapid glance over her shoulder, eyes widening with a mix of shock and mortification. Then it happened. His release abrupt and uncontrollable, leaving a warm, sticky sensation where their bodies met. For a few seconds, he trembled, nearly dizzy with ecstasy and shame. Only after that fleeting moment of rapture did his mind start to return to reality. Embarrassment overwhelmed him, and he would have given anything to vanish on the spot. Fanny's face flared with fresh indignation as her lips parted in a silent gasp. She could feel the telltale warmth, now dampening the cloth at the base of her robe. Knowledge of what precisely had just transpired made her cringe inwardly, part furious, part wholly taken aback. "Sorry, Master Fanny," Han Shuo stammered, his voice pitched high. I didn't mean to." He had no idea how to handle this humiliating outcome, and his chest tightened with dread at the thought that Fanny might lash out in fury, especially since she was a much stronger adept mage. He felt genuine fear that she might fling him from the horse or punish him severely. Even so, an undercurrent of pleasure lingered in his senses, and that only made him feel guiltier. Confliction flickered behind Fanny's eyes. On one hand, she was outraged to have been essentially violated, if only by accident. On the other, Han Shuo was barely more than a boy, and she understood that at his age, physical responses could be unpredictable, especially given the closeness forced by riding double on a horse. She was furious, no doubt, but somewhere in her, empathy tempered her reaction. "Damn you, Brian," she spat in a low voice, turning her head partly away in disgust and embarrassment. "I'll deal with you later." The next instant, she pinched his inner thighs harden. Han Shuo yelped in surprise and pain, craning his neck to look down at her fingers digging into his leg. She scowled, her blush deepening even further. Lisa, riding a short distance ahead, heard his cry and called back, voice tinged with concern. "Master Fanny, what's going on back there? Brian, are you all right?" "Nothing important," Fanny responded before Han Shuo could open his mouth. Her tone was clipped, and she did her best to project calm. "He just lost his balance for a moment and panicked. That's all." Hearing her explanation, Lisa frowned slightly but decided not to press the matter. The group resumed their journey, cantering along the winding path toward Droll with renewed urgency. Han Shuo withdrew as much as he could without actually toppling from the horse, trying to minimize any further contact with Fanny's body. He wanted the ground to swallow him up. At least half an hour passed, and just when he thought his ordeal was over, a traitorous heat stirred in him again. Shocked at his own lack of control, he felt himself stiffen once more. Sensing it, Fanny immediately reined the horse to the side of the road, leaving the main group behind. With a quick yank, she pulled the steed to a halt, turned to glare at Han Shuo, and wordlessly swapped positions with him. "You ride in front," she ordered tersely, shooting him a glare like a brand of hot iron. "And you're going to learn how to handle this horse, right now." "But I've never ridden a horse before," Han Shuo protested weakly, clambering up toward the saddle's front. His face was still bright red, and he could hardly think straight. "Then shut up and learn," she snapped. Her tone had lost the usual gentle cadence she used with him. Obviously his behavior had wounded not just her pride, but also her sense of personal decency. "In the back now?" Fanny loosely draped the reins over Han Shuo's hands and tried to show him how to guide the horse without letting it go wild. Unfortunately, the new arrangement brought its own brand of chaos. Han Shuo lacked experience, and the horse initially responded with sudden, unpredictable lunges, braying and shaking its mane in protest. Both of them nearly toppled off more than once. Fanny had to cling to the back of his robe for stability. Her body pressed momentarily against his whenever the horse bucked. Now it was her chest that accidentally collided with his shoulders and back, those soft contours pressing firmly into him each time they jolted around. With every bump, Han Shuo's mind spun. Instead of focusing on the horse, his senses zeroed in on the bounce of Fanny's full bosom. He could feel her gentle warmth shifting against him. An impossible distraction. Meanwhile, Fanny tried, through gritted teeth, to hold herself upright and maintain what little dignity remained. After an extended struggle, accompanied by more exasperated muttering from Fanny, Han Shuo slowly got the knack of reining in the horse. His grip steadied, and the animal settled into a smoother trot. Fanny, red-faced, kept one palm flat against his back, ensuring her front no longer pressed as intimately to him. Even so, her body occasionally brushed his, creating a subtle friction that made them both hyper-aware of their proximity. By the time they reached Droll, dusk had settled over the horizon, and the sky turned a purplish hue. The others in their party, including Jean and the necromancy students, were already waiting near the town entrance. Their expressions bore a hint of worry, likely born from the delay. Jean strode forward, relief flooding his face when he saw Fanny safe and sound. "Master Fanny, You two took quite a while. I was getting anxious, worried something might have happened on the road. Fanny swung off the horse with a bit more haste than usual, stretching her limbs. We're fine then. Brian wanted to practice riding, so I taught him for a bit. That's why we lagged behind, she said briskly, though Shuo could detect the remnants of fluster in her voice. With the group reunited, Jean explained that he had already arranged lodging in a local hotel. We'll stay there tonight, he informed them. Tomorrow at dawn, we set out for the dark forest. With an inward sigh of relief, Fanny nodded. Good. Let's get these horses stabled. I need a bath. It's been a sweaty day. She shot Shuo a meaningful look. Brian, after you've taken care of the horses, come see me in my room. We have important matters to discuss. Shuo's heart dropped to his stomach. He could guess exactly what matters she meant. He was still plagued by the mortifying memory of his earlier accident, and had no idea how severely she planned to admonish him. Yet, a faint tingle of residual excitement remained, a mixture of dread and guilty anticipation. Yes, Master Fanny, he said, unable to mask the anxious note in his voice. Fanny hurried into the hotel, presumably to rinse away the day's sweat, and to scrub off any unwelcome evidence of his earlier transgression. Shuo couldn't blame her. He himself felt intensely aware of the lingering stickiness around his lower regions, and he planned on washing up as soon as possible. Under Jean's supervision, Shuo and a few male students led the half-dozen horses to a nearby stable. They made sure the animals were fed and watered, then followed Jean to the hotel. The purple twilight had deepened, and the streets of Droll had come alive with neon-like lights, lanterns, and a bustling nightlife that hinted at the town's reputation. Master Jean, Bach spoke up, his tone carefully casual. Droll is so far from the Empire's core. We've heard rumors that this place has, many interesting shops. We'd like to walk around a bit before turning in. Some of the others are curious too. He darted a quick glance at a few students who nodded eagerly. No, Jean said flatly, crossing his arms. You think I'm ignorant about your intentions. This town of Droll is notorious. A lot of adventurers who come here expect to die tomorrow, so they seek every pleasure imaginable tonight. That means Droll is rife with places of questionable entertainment. I'll not have you lot indulging in depravity. We're here for a proper expedition, not to roam pleasure dens. At that, the boys' shoulders sagged. Grumbling under their breath, they trudged through the hotel's entrance, disappointed but not daring to defy him. Shuo observed the surroundings. Even from a distance, he could see young women in extravagant, revealing clothing standing under lamplights, beckoning to passers-by. The night was only beginning, and it was clear that Droll embraced its hedonistic reputation wholeheartedly. Once inside, Jean handed out keys to the students, assigning them small rooms with minimal fuss. When it came Shuo's turn, Jean gave him a smug smile. We're short on funds after spending an extra 50 gold to rent those battle steeds, he said in a half-apologetic, half-sneering tone. So you'll be staying in the abandoned storehouse behind the hotel. They don't even bother to lock it. Just make do, Brian. Jean's smirk only deepened when he saw Shuo's faint scowl. He turned on his heel and walked away, muttering just loud enough for Shuo to hear. That's what you get for riding a horse with my beloved Fanny, you lowly errand slave. If Shuo had still been the old, timid Brian, he might have felt deeply wounded or helpless at such remarks. But now, after the transformations brought on by his demonic cultivation, and the strong desires swirling in his head, he merely narrowed his eyes. His hearing was acute enough to catch every word. A cold spark flared in his gaze, though he kept his composure outwardly. Inside his mind, a dark whisper formed. Just wait, Jean. One day, if Fanny truly becomes mine, you'll be the one crying tears of blood. Chasing that thought away, he turned his attention to Fanny's request. He needed to go to her room, face whatever lecture or punishment awaited him there. Swallowing the lump in his throat, he steeled himself and headed for the staircase, bracing for an encounter that could either end very badly or mark a pivotal shift in their relationship.